Hello everybody and welcome to session 1 of 4 around sustainable food tourism. And the first session is about creating a sustainable food tourism experience, how to get started. So content for this session is going to be food tourism. What is it for food tourism? Why go green? Why sustainability matters? What does sustainable food tourism look like? We've got some great case studies. We've got some really great opportunities about quick wins, understanding how to take a baseline review of your business and getting started. So that's what we're going to cover today. We've got two presenters today. Myself, I'm the Chief Executive of Green Tourism. I've been working in sustainable tourism now for over 25 years, and I'm the co-founder of the Green Tourism Certification Programme. And Sandra's my colleague today. Would you like to introduce yourself, Sandra?
Hello, everybody. My name is Sandra Reid, and I'm the Director of Fair Consulting. We support businesses of all shapes and sizes to develop their hospitality, food and drink offers.
Thanks, Sandra. It's great to have you on the session with me. So just a little bit of background, unless you haven't heard of Green Tourism. It is a sustainability certification program, primarily for hospitality and tourism businesses, but we do have a very wide range of organisations and businesses that are part of the program, including food and drink manufacturers as well. As I said, it's been operating now for over 25 years, and we have 2,500 certified businesses across the UK and other countries, and over 900 of them are actually in Scotland. And as I said, we cover all types from accommodation and visitor attractions right through to eateries and also food producers and manufacturers. And if you want to find out more about the certification program, go to our website. There's lots of information and on how to get involved and how to make changes within your business to become more sustainable. But today we are going to concentrate on food tourism, and I'm going to hand over to Sandra to give you an introduction as to what that actually means.
So here we have on this slide some of Scotland's most amazing food tourism businesses. You can see Ian Spink and his superb smokies in the top left-hand corner here. We've got a Cullen Skink champion. We've got a gin tasting from the Gin Bothy at an event. We've got an afternoon tea bus doing the rounds of the Edinburgh streets, and we've got some fruit picking in Fife. So a real range of activities there. But what do I actually mean by food tourism? So good to take a look at a definition, I think, here. And the World Food Tourism Association defines tourism as the act of travelling to get a taste of place in order to get a sense of place. I think this definition is really considering the serious food tourist, someone who goes out of their way to find a great food tourism experience. But to be honest, all tourists are food tourists because we all have to eat. And in fact, 35% of global tourism revenues can be attributed to food and drink. So there's some real value there. So what I've given you here is a link to the Scottish Food Tourism Strategy, which was launched in 2019 by STA and Scotland Food and Drink. So you can have a look at that at your leisure. But just to take a look at this now, the strategy has 5 pillars. And I think the most important of these is pillar number 2, which looks at the provision of quality products and experiences for all. Now, here I'm not talking about fine dining. I'm not talking about a gourmet event. I'm talking about authentic and quality food experiences. So it might be a bowl of Cullen Skink in a beachside cafe, or being welcomed with a really great dram after a foraging walk. And moving on, what is food tourism and where can we find food tourism experiences? So markets, events and festivals. Here in the Northeast, there are superb events such as Taste of Grampian and the Provenance Festival that was held in 2021. Brewing and distilling is a huge part of our food and drink heritage. Agritourism is growing steadily in Scotland with farm experiences, farm tours, hands-on activities like lambing, and there was even online lambing during the pandemic. Most farms, a lot of farms now have farm shops, and that's a huge part of their activity. From an education perspective, there are cooking and baking classes, there are workshops, food manufacturers are very, very well placed to take advantage of the popularity of food tourism. There might be factory tours, or there might be more interactive activities such as make your own cheese, make your own ice cream. Something I've seen coming up recently is walking tours and food safaris. So perhaps a walking lunch or a dinner where you have a different course at a variety of venues. Food trails, going from farm to fork or sea to spoon. And of course, at the absolute cutting edge of food tourism, cafes, restaurants, and retail food outlets. So the features of food tourism and what makes a successful food tourism product, I've given 6 suggestions and one extra one. Food tourism experiences need to be authentic. As I said before, it doesn't need to be gourmet, it just needs to be real, and it should create a memory. Storytelling is a huge part of the food tourism experience. You should be able to connect with the maker and feel that you're having a personal interaction with them. Many successful food tourism businesses rely on collaboration, and these are often the best ones. Instagram, we all need our businesses to be Instagrammable, so make sure that you are using that, using great photography to sell your experience. Obviously, your experience needs to be saleable. It's all about making some financial return. But a big thread that is running through this is, of course, sustainability. And Andrea is going to discuss more of that now.
Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, so I think we're all pretty aware that man has a massive impact on the planet. I think this is something that we've all become even more aware of during lockdown. But our impact is significant, and we've got reports like the IPCC report that came out last year, identifying that we're in a code red situation, and climate change is significantly changing our weather and impacting our businesses around kind of increased heat, increased erratic weather, more flooding, heavier downpours, wetter summers, this kind of thing. There's also other aspects around pollution, whether that's plastic on the beaches or air pollution or ground pollution is important and something that we have an impact on. Depletion of natural resources that have finite amounts, such as the heavy metals we use in our mobile phones. But some aspects are more relevant potentially to your businesses around food waste and making sure that we are using everything from top to tail, food to fork and end to end for our products. And the legislation is changing around single-use items, and in Scotland now it's going to become law that you're not allowed to have plastic stirrers and things like that. So legislation is pushing things as well. And I've put a link there at the bottom to an excellent website that WWF run, which is how you can look at your own carbon footprint. And you have to answer a number of questions. It's a great interactive tool. It asks about what kind of food you eat, how you travel, what kind of car you use, that kind of thing. And it gives you an indication of how much carbon you're using in comparison to what the planet can actually afford to use. So unfortunately, I do drive a hybrid and I'm pretty much pescatarian, but even my carbon footprint at the moment is over 100%. So I'm using more than what the planet is. So I've got things to do myself, and we're all in that learning process. How we look at mitigating the impacts, I think, is really significant. I mentioned legislation, and we're going to see more of that coming down. Bigger businesses now having to do mandatory carbon reporting, and that's something that's going to come down more and more to smaller and smaller businesses. So you need to be aware of what you're using, what energy, and how you can look at reducing your carbon. And sustainability is a competitive advantage. We've seen a significant increase in customers, suppliers, and consumers looking at wanting to choose more sustainable options. And that's not just around the environmental side, it's also around social justice, and a big issue that a lot of businesses are looking at, especially when you've come into looking at sort of growers and food producers, is loss of biodiversity, and some terrible stats there around the amount of species that's been in decline through the UK because of climate change, around land and sea use, pollution, over exploitation. All of these things have an impact. And one of the terms that we're looking at more and more is the circular economy. So the diagram, the triangular diagram there is the waste hierarchy, which is reduce, reuse, recycle, create energy, and then dispose of it. But actually, what the government is now encouraging, and organisations like Zero Waste Scotland, which has some excellent resources on their website, is around a circular economy. So there should actually be, if you're approaching this in the right way, nothing should go to landfill, that actually the circular economy should mean that even your waste would actually be used by other people. So to emphasize that, I mean, one person's waste it can particularly be another person's treasure. And some great examples, again, on Zero Waste Scotland's website, or looking at what Circular Glasgow has done. So they've got a great initiative, a case study where you've got a brewery working with a bakery. So the waste products from one is being used by the other. So that sort of circular economy is something we need to be looking at more and more within Scotland. And even within the North East, you've got a great initiative being delivered in partnership with Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce, which is the Circular North East. And that again has a lot of information that you can look at on that website. And that gives you suggestions and opportunities for reducing your waste and helping other organisations and businesses. And I think there's some of the examples there in the food and drink side of things is like redefining the use of waste around waste straw and oilseed rape, fish processing waste and protein production was some of the case studies that are on that website, and looking at how you can bring that back into production and someone else, another business can use. In terms of sustainable tourism Scotland, I mean, that's a significant growth over the last few years, and one that's been very much supported by Visit Scotland, the National Tourism Agency. Sustainability has a triple bottom line. It's about the environment, but it's also making sure that it's economically viable and that it takes social aspects into consideration. And a lot of people now are using the term net zero carbon, and that means reducing your carbon emissions to zero. So it means you need to know what carbon emissions you have, but then looking at ways of reducing that through scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. And I know I'm talking jargon here, but these are terminologies that are going to become more and more used and more important to you and businesses in Scotland going forward as we look at reducing those scopes. There's also some great initiatives out that the United Nations are doing around sustainable tourism. So there's the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and there is actually a website where they're looking at sustainable goals, particularly relating to how they work with tourism. And I mentioned Visit Scotland, so there is the Scottish strategy, which was launched a few years ago, and actually that's the Scotland Outlook 2030, which has the title of Responsible Tourism for a Sustainable Future, and that's been delivered by the industry for the industry. And again, there's some excellent information on Visit Scotland's website about what that strategy is, how you can get involved, and actually how they're working to help support businesses through a net zero pathway. And there is support and funding available for businesses looking to go down that route of a net zero approach. In terms of why businesses get involved with sustainability and sustainable tourism or food tourism is obviously multitask, depending on the type of business they are. But some of the research that we've done is actually, it shows that businesses understand that there is a marketing advantage of being involved in sustainability. There's some significant, sensible, practical things about reducing energy and waste and things like that. A lot of businesses are doing it for a personal commitment, but more and more are doing it because they're seeing a customer demand and they want to do something around climate change. They want to highlight their ethical purchasing approach, and the local food is significantly important, and we've seen a massive growth of that in the last few years. But there's also social aspects around enhancing your staff well-being and engagement, and that single-use aspect, which I talked about earlier on, that legislation is going to look at as well. So there's many different reasons why people come to it, and there's not one overarching. It really does come down to what you do within your business and what your clients and your customers and your suppliers are asking for. I'm going to hand back to Sandra now, and she's going to go through some excellent case studies that she knows about.
Thanks, Andrea. So the first case study here is Fridheimer tomato farm, and this is in Iceland. I've been fortunate to visit Iceland on 3 occasions, very lucky, as part of a food tourism learning journey group. One of the most inspirational businesses I came across was this tomato farm. It's a family-run business which is based about 60 miles from Reykjavik. They were already a very successful wholesaler in the tomato business. But about 10 years ago, the business diversified into tourism products. And what they introduced was a greenhouse dining experience, which you can see here, which is absolutely marvelous. It's multi-sensory. You have you're in among the tomatoes. You can smell them. You can eat them. You can see the workers uh, organizing all of these beautiful vegetables. So other activities that they got involved in was pick your own, which is quite common with greenhouse products, but they also introduced cookery demonstrations and events. They now have a number of retail products, including chutneys, ice cream, which is amazingly good actually, and rather unexpectedly good, and some pre-mixed cocktails. So it's a really innovative company. When you think about greenhouses, they are not really known as the most green of businesses. But this particular company introduced a number of initiatives to reduce their carbon footprint. Similarly to many businesses in Iceland, their heat is generated through geothermal springs. So they have a borehole in their grounds, and that supplies all of their hot water and all of their heat. In terms of the greenhouse itself, it's been built with very thin panes of glass so that they maximize the light, and that reduces their dependency on electric light. The tomato plants themselves are pollinated by what they call their in-house bee team, and they use a range of pests to control the bugs that we would ordinarily find in our tomato plants, and therefore avoid any reliance or any over-reliance on chemicals, which I think we very often see in terms of greenhouse products, perhaps in this country. So sticking with the bees here, this guy is the beekeeper at Glenkinchie Distillery, which is in East Lothian. Glenkinchie is the lowlands home of Johnnie Walker, and Diageo, who owns the Johnnie Walker brand, had a major program of redevelopment of their brand homes from 2019, and had a huge focus on sustainability. Glenkinchie opened in spring 2020 with and was able to open with a Green Tourism Award, which was absolutely fantastic. So how did they actually do that? So the build had a huge emphasis on protecting the natural environment, right through from the selection of building materials for the build itself, to installing bee hives, bat boxes, and a selection of plants in their beautiful garden, which were designed to feed and shelter birds, insects, and animals. They've partnered with a local honey maker, Hoods, to create a Glenkinchie honey, and they will have that shortly available for sale in their shop. In terms of waste, they have a zero waste to landfill strategy, and they support local at all times, partnering with food suppliers in the creation of their cafe foods. And I did notice that they were having a tasting event recently with a local cheesemaker. So using everything local, fantastic local supply chain for cafe and tasting. So closer to home for the Northeast, the next example is Castleton Farm Shop. They are based at Laurencekirk, and the business is really working hard on their sustainability activity. They have 3 main areas of focus, which is to lower their carbon footprint by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. They're concentrating on regenerative farming, so using break crops to support biodiversity, and they are reducing the use of single-use plastic. Single-use plastic is, I guess, a huge matter for businesses who are involved in fruit crops. So this is a huge step for this business. They've introduced a biomass boiler for the farm shop business, and a photovoltaic system on the roof captures solar energy to reduce their dependence on the grid. They have a heat pump which taps into river water, and they have introduced the closed loop system for plastics. I would urge you to take a look at their website. They have an absolutely excellent sustainability policy, and it's written with great passion, and it's a really accessible document. So if you're looking for inspiration on how to communicate your own sustainability messages, this website is well worth taking a look at.
Thanks, Sandra. That's amazing, really inspirational case studies there. So I hope you all find that very useful. What I want to do now is, over the next few slides, is just talk about what you can do within your business. And one of the things that we talk about on a regular basis is a quick win. So these are activities and measures that you can put in place fairly easily, fairly quickly, that's at a low cost, no big capital expenditure, maybe has a low risk involved to it. It has maybe it's not going to take a lot of resources like staff time. You don't have to get another contractor in, and actually where you'll see a quick return around, you know, visible impact that you can see, and so you can start to make savings. And actually, a lot of these quick wins you'll actually find from within your own team. And if you're actually talking to your maintenance guys, or to somebody in production, or somebody even in the offices, around where can we make changes to save money in terms of energy use or resources, you know, reducing paper, or reducing the amount of products and produce that you're using, I think you'll find there's lots and lots of ideas. So speak to your team, identify where those quick wins are, and put them in place, because actually what they do is they build momentum. You start to see some savings, and it can really start boosting confidence within the organization as to some of the bigger measures that you might have to think about taking on board. And here's some really simple examples of things that we've seen businesses do that actually significantly make a difference. So the first one is just taking a lighting survey. Now we all know that legislation has moved on over the last few years, and you can no longer buy tungsten bulbs, and even compact fluorescents are being phased out, and LED is the way forward. But you've probably got storage places or cupboards or back of house areas where you've still got some of the older light bulbs, which will be using a lot more energy, 5, 10, 15 times as much as an LED light bulb. So taking time to take an actual survey, recording all of the lights you've got, then looking at what you can replace them with in terms of an LED alternative, and hopefully you will significantly make some changes. And the payback on LED is within months, it's not years like it might have been in the past. And also, like the greenhouses, you know, making the most of natural light is also very important. Some simple practical things around insulation. If you've got exposed pipework coming off hot water tanks or boilers, or heating systems around your premises, putting a simple insulation around that is going to significantly make savings in terms of how hard your boiler or your electricity tank takes in order to heat up that water. So think about and look at where you've got opportunities like that. Heating controls, you know, just a simple turning down 1 degree can make a significant saving in your heating. Having turning off policies, so when, you know, staff aren't in particular rooms, having, you know, lights on a sensor, or having a turning off policy so that the lights aren't on all the time. And then simple things like making sure that your taps aren't, you know, excessive in terms of their flow rate. There's a very simple exercise you can do using a stopwatch, or your second hand on your watch, and a bucket, where you basically turn the tap on and you run the water at full pace for 30 seconds. you measure how much water that is, double it, and then you know what your flow rate is per minute. And there are advice out there as to what the flow rate should be in terms of litres per minute to be efficient. And even looking at when you're replacing sinks to put in detectors and things like that. And a really simple one that we see quite regularly in terms of cleaning. So actually, when your cleaners are cleaning toilets, whether it's public toilets or staff toilets in the morning every day, you know, how often are they flushing the toilets just to clean them? So this is nothing to do with when they're being used, but actually, you know, and we found that especially in some accommodation providers, the number of times that the toilets flushed when they're cleaning is significantly more than you need to. So they introduced a one flush policy. So there's definitely ways, simple behavioural changes that can be looked at. And also talk to your suppliers, review your service contracts. You know, it might be that your suppliers can offer you more sustainable options, and they just didn't know that you wanted that, or that you were interested in those kind of things. So talk to your suppliers and look at those simple, quick wins. And one of the things that we suggest is a really good way of identifying those quick wins, and also identifying those measures that could make significant savings but might need more investment and time, is to carry out a baseline review. And we've got a really great set of checklists that we can make available to you through Opportunity Northeast if you wanted to actually do a baseline review. And this baseline review has a list of a framework of measures that you can do within your business. And it will help you, as I said, look at those quick wins. And behavioural change is something that I think a lot of people underestimate. You know, sustainability is not an add-on. It's something that everybody in your team should be working towards. And sometimes behavioural change can take longer than you think. You know, it can take several weeks or even months to get people to think about doing things in a different way. So our framework and checklist is based around 3 different pillars. So it's about people, it's about places, and it's about the planet. So the people section is again around that, making people aware, communicating what you're aiming to do within your business, working with the local community or with your suppliers, making sure that your people are happy, you know, healthy, and well-being is looked after, and that you're looking around equality and diversity. As I said, sustainability does include the social aspects as well. So within our checklist, there are, under each of those headings, sort of 4 or 5 different measures that you can do that give you ideas around implementing your sustainability strategy, and it will help you with that baseline review. The places pillar is really, really important, especially I think to the food tourism, because it's all about you know, that sense of place that Sandra talked about at the beginning around you know, tasting the view, this kind of thing. So it's about identifying what's important in your destination, identifying the experiences that your customers can involve, you know, how they can travel to and from your organization, whether that's your team or your customers, making sure they're using lower carbon options. And then really promoting that kind of local provenance, the food and the drink that you're producing, if it's been produced in a sustainable way, an ethical way, an organic way, that's highlighting that kind of information to your visitors and to your customers. And also considering within your production processes the importance of biodiversity, whether it's use of natural pests or whether it's companion planting within your fields to make sure that you're using natural ways to cut down on waste within your production. And then the last pillar, the obvious ones around resource efficiency, making sure that you're being as efficient as possible around your energy, whether that's lighting or appliances or heating, being efficient with your water use to make sure that your flow rates are appropriate, and also identifying opportunities for waste. So that's whether it's zero waste to landfill or you're implementing a circular economy process within your organization to make sure that there's nothing that has to go to landfill, and that you can identify other markets for your waste products, so I can say it becomes someone else's treasure. Carbon, I mentioned, you know, it's going to become something that we all need to report on. I think that's something that if you're not looking at now, you really need to start thinking about that. And there's lots of help out there through government organizations. And the chemical thing is really important as well, because that also has an impact in terms of your staff, in terms of using chemicals, but also, down the stream in terms of water pollution, and wanting also to reduce the amount of the natural resources that the world has, the planet has. Chemicals is an important thing to look at avoiding and reducing the amount that we're using. So our checklist, it covers all those aspects. And I think if you were doing a baseline review, it would really help you identify those quick wins and where you can make savings and look at improving within your organization. And I wanted to just go through some of the kind of sections. So in terms of utilities and consumables, you want to be looking at, what do you buy, what do you spend money on, and identifying the big areas, what do you spend a lot of money on, or what do you buy a lot of, is something to really look at to begin with, and see, do we need to buy quite so much of that? Is there some way of reducing the amount of that product that we're using? And what are you using that, looking in your bins, what's being thrown into the bin that's going to landfill, or even going to recycling that you don't need to have so much of? Could you be buying things in bigger bottles and having less packaging and that kind of thing? So looking at what you're throwing away is a really, great way to start. And Zero Waste Scotland again has some great information on like saving energy and saving money, and food waste we've talked about, is actually a significant thing, and it's not just plate food, but it's food waste within the production process. So Zero Waste Scotland's food and drink page has some excellent information on how you can reduce that, in terms of food and drink producers, and the different aspects of your any products that you use within your business, looking at how you can reduce those in a simple and easy way as a quick win. And that baseline review will actually help you with that. I think Sandra's going to give you some examples of that now.
Yeah, so these are some examples from food and drink businesses who have looked at ways of saving energy, saving costs. So I think we're probably all familiar with the Eden Mill St Andrews gin, and traditionally their product was served in quite a heavy ceramic bottle, and their waste costs were quite significant. Eden Mill are now using a bespoke lightweight glass bottle, which has saved them 18% on glass waste. But interestingly, having heard Andrea talking about chemicals there, a lot of the distilleries, particularly gin distilleries, are going for a refill product. So you keep the bottle and you just refill with with a disposable. Patterson of Arran Shortbread are a really fantastic local company who introduced the behavioural change that Andrea was talking about in terms of their electrical costs. So electrical costs were running particularly high, so introduced a monitoring exercise where everyone was keeping an eye on each other as to when machinery was turned on, when lights were turned on, and they found that this behavioural change really made a huge difference in their costs. They had a turn it off policy, and electricity costs reduced by, I believe it's 9%. So it really made a huge difference. Valvona and Crolla in Edinburgh, a traditional Italian deli, beautiful shop with the wonderful counters with arrays of meat, cheese, antipasti. And the business moved to LED lighting after some work on the shop. And they obviously made savings in their electrical costs, but actually what they also found was that customer reactions were really positive because the displays were really enhanced by the LED lighting. So it's really interesting to see that expected benefits of cost saving can also be supplemented with unexpected advantages.
Excellent. Thanks, Sandra. Another aspect that I think is really important to look at in terms of baseline reviews around your sort of community accessibility and biodiversity that we mentioned. So again, looking through the checklist and identifying where you're supporting the local community. I'm sure that many of you are doing things with your local community, whether that's local employment or supporting local charities. or providing facilities for local groups. So identifying that is really important, and telling your staff and telling your suppliers and your customers that you're an ethical and caring organization, I think is really important, especially for your local residents in your area. You might also be supporting charities locally or even internationally, especially if it's linked in with tree planting or growing that relates to your particular products. You might be supporting local craftspeople, so you might be using, if you do have a cafe or a shop, you might be using artwork or people, things like that, or even in your staff canteen or your staff areas, you could be putting in products that are being produced locally to a local identity. Accessibility is a really important thing, and there's a couple of really great places to look. So Visit Scotland has a fantastic website on .org around inclusive and accessible, and there's the Ewan's Guide as well, which is a consumer facing guide which tells you about places you can go to that have accessible premises. And I think it's really important, and also important for your own team in terms of diversity and making sure that you're being able to provide facilities if you do have anyone in your team that have accessible issues. And then the biodiversity, looking after wildlife. If you've got some grounds or estates, or you've got large fields, I mentioned companion planting or hedgerows and things like that. It's really important in terms of wildlife avenues and things like that. Increasing biodiversity. And there's some great organisations out there like Nature.Scot and Scottish Wildlife Trust, and also the North East Biodiversity Group as well has some excellent information on things that you can do within the area. And these are all things that you can probably do as an organisation, or you can get your green team or some of your staff to actually support many of these important products and services.
So looking at some food and drink businesses who have introduced community and biodiversity initiatives into their business which supports their green agenda. So some great examples here, I hope. On the right hand side, we've got Petra Went from West Brewery in Glasgow. So West have founded the West Women Investment Fund, and this gives support to female entrepreneurs. West Brewery also have a policy to give their employees shares in the business. So after a year of employment, you're entitled to receive shares in the business. So they really have, they are owned by their staff. So next one I've got here is Ardbekey Distillery. So in the bottom left, they are working with East of Scotland Beekeeper Association to support biodiversity in terms of the planting on their land. Ardross Farm Shop in Fife have regularly supported the RSPB with a range of activities, and last year was the starting point for a bike ride, and really encouraged local people to join in and discover wildlife in the area. Bellevue Farm on Arran, which is not pictured here, but they have a shed which was community funded, and they used this shed on their land to host markets with local suppliers and really engage with the local community food suppliers as well as craft suppliers. And it's a great tourism destination. And closer to home for yourselves in the Northeast, the Bay, the very famous Bay Fish and Chip Shop in Stonehaven, they donate carrier bag charges to local charities. So as you can see, it doesn't need to be a complex exercise. The simple carrier bag example shows that. And I think community benefits are some of the easiest to deliver and talk about.
Excellent. Thanks, Sandra. I'm just, as we go towards the ends of this session, I wanted to give you some top tips, because I think it's always a question we get asked is, where do we start? Because sustainability is a big topic, and there's lots of things that you can do, and sometimes it's difficult to know where to start. So the very first one is, I think, about raising awareness. So it's actually making sure that you as either an employee or the owner of an organization, of a business, is aware of what's out there and aware of your impact, So the baseline review is a good place to start. But in terms of being aware, there's lots of information out there. I've mentioned Zero Waste Scotland several times, but again, it is an excellent site. It's got some great information on energy efficiency. They actually run, they have on their website the energy technology list, which is really important if you're looking at buying new equipment for your business. It actually has a list of bits of equipment and how efficient they are. So it recommends the most efficient bit of equipment so that you've got something that's going to be energy efficient when it's implemented. But there's lots of training sessions like this one you're watching now, but there are other ones out there. You can sign up to newsletters, you can share information with your team through notice boards or an intranet and getting everyone involved. And actually setting up a green team is a really great way to start. Ask for volunteers. If you can, try and get somebody from each department within your organization, someone who's keen and has an understanding and wants to contribute to making the business a lower carbon or a greener organization, and asking them for suggestions. Like I said, that a lot of the ideas are likely to come from within your own team. And get out there and get advice. There's loads of organisations that help, whether it's Zero Waste Scotland or Visit Scotland and other organisations. And Zero Waste Scotland run a really great online course called Green Champions Training. Again, it takes you through a process, a little bit like a more advanced version of the baseline review that we've talked about and the checklist. So it takes you through all different aspects of a business and what kind of measures you can look at and where you can look at opportunities to make savings and improvements. So top tip one, awareness, getting yourself aware. I think there's another really great way of getting involved, which is something you can share with your team or with, if you've got a website with your customers and suppliers, is campaigns. And there's some excellent campaigns out there, especially relating to food and drink production. So there's things like Compost Week, which is coming up later in March. Earth Hour is more around tourism and hospitality, where you're encouraged to switch your lights off for an hour. But again, it's something that maybe a lot of your customers might be interested in. And then the Great British Beach Clean, which is every September, which is run by the MCS, and that is actually really important when it comes to plastics on beaches and things like that. But there's loads more. Organic September, in September, the World Soil Day. Then we've got social aspects like Fair Trade Fortnight, which is happening now up until the 5th of March. And then biodiversity, so things like World Bee Day and Garden Wildlife Week, and even aspects like if you do have a cafe, you could sign up to something like Refill app, which is an app on people's phones. You can put signage in your cafe to say that you would be happy to refill somebody's water bottle for free. I mean, hopefully they might buy a cup of tea or something, or a jar of honey or whatever when they're visiting you, but it's free and it's another way of getting your business recognized. So again, there's lots of opportunities to get involved with campaigns, and like I say, sharing them on your social media and that kind of thing shows that you're a caring organization. And then I think another really great way, and I think that we very rarely come across businesses that aren't doing something around sustainability. And actually, we always say to people, everybody's on a green journey. There isn't an end of sustainability. There's always something more you can do, but telling your green story is a really important thing. So if you are supporting local economy, the local community, if you're caring for your team in a certain way, or your guests, involved with cultural heritage, you might be involved with supporting a local church or a local historic building, biodiversity. Telling your green story is really important. And again, telling your team and the people who you work with is important, but also telling your customers and your local community, I think, is really important to say that we're a conscientious and sustainably and ethically run organization, and we want to support people. And I think the big thing about telling your green story, it needs to be honest and transparent. As I said, everyone's on a different place on their journey. And if you're just starting out, then that's quite all right. That's quite okay to tell people we're just starting, we're doing our baseline review, we're recognizing those quick wins that we want to do, and we're putting in place a proper strategy to make sure that we're going to be a greener business going forward. And that's something that we are putting our efforts into, and we want to encourage everybody that we work with, all our stakeholders, to do that. and give them information about it as well. Tell them what you're doing. We've got some examples on our website on, you know, the types of things that businesses have done. And as I said, it is a journey. It's something that we need to get on board with as soon as you can, but, you know, don't try and do everything all at the beginning. So in terms of next steps, I've talked the baseline review and the checklist that you can get from the One Opportunity Northeast website or from ourselves is quite detailed, and hopefully will be a really great way of encouraging you to go through that baseline review and involve your team. So what we've done is, under each of the different sections, the people, places and planet, we've detailed the kind of actions you can do, giving you a description of that. And under the checklist, you've got an opportunity to say you've done it, that you've partially done it, or that it's complete, an opportunity to put in information. So all of these documents can be shared within your team to create an action plan. So you can record what you've done, note measures done, identify the quick wins. And I said we've got people and then the places as well. There's in total, we've probably got around about 70 different measures across those 3 different pillars that you can look at doing, taking notes and using that to identify those things you're going to do straight away, those things you've already done, and those that might be more efforts, might need some advice from some experts, might need some bit more investment, is something that you'll build into your strategy, your sustainability strategy going forward. And that's something that we'd like to encourage all of you to do. And I'm hoping that the information and the case studies and the examples and the structure of what we've talked about today will help you and encourage you to take, you know, your first steps on the sustainability journey, or if you've already started your journey, that it's encouraged you to do more. And we'd really like to ask you to get involved with the other food tourism sessions that we've got planned. The next one is about customer expectations and what people are actually expecting in terms of sustainability. The third one is very practical, about identifying some simple practical changes, some of which we've talked about today, but going into them in a bit more depth. And then the last one is about taking those next steps, using your baseline review, developing your sustainability strategy in terms of the future of your company, and making sure that you're a green organisation to take advantage of the market that's out there, but also to recognise that it's something that we all need to do, and it is something the way that Scotland and the Northeast wants to be seen as leaders in that sustainability journey. So the sessions that we've been involved with are being supported and led by the Opportunity Northeast and funded through the Scottish Government's Northeast Economic Recovery Skills Fund. Green Tourism, myself and my team are the delivery contractor. So if you have got any queries, particularly around anything that's on the course that we've talked about today, or any of the other sessions that are coming up, please get in touch through inquiries@green-tourism.com. But if you've got any questions around the particular project or anything for Opportunity Northeast, then please get in touch with Elizabeth through that email address there. And thank you very much for being involved, and thank you, Sandra, for helping me out today.